I remember the scream that tore from my throat. It wasn't human, not really. It was something primal, desperate. The sound you make when you see something you love vanish under chaos. That scream is still in my bones. Jack, my dog, had already leapt. I hadn't even processed what was happening. 1 second, we were walking along the edge of the rushing river, and the next, there was a splash, and he was gone. The water was high, too high. Late spring in Montana meant snowmelt roaring down from the mountains like a freight train. I saw the current grab him immediately, but Jack didn't fight it. He swam toward the thing bobbing in the middle of the river. I squinted through the spray. It was alive. A bear cub. I froze. It flailed helplessly, spinning in circles, its head barely above the water. Its limbs slapped the surface in sheer panic. I didn't even think to look around for a mother. All I saw was my dog, fighting to reach it. Jack! Jack! He didn't turn. His ears were flat against his skull, his body low in the water. The river was trying to eat him alive. My feet moved before my mind caught up. I ran down the muddy slope, slipping, nearly falling, trying to follow along the riverbank. I kept losing sight of them. Trees blurred past. I didn't know what I was doing. Then, for a moment, I saw Jack reach the cub. He snapped at its scruff, catching the fur in his teeth. The cub yelped and flailed again, and Jack nearly lost his grip. They spun together in the current, vanishing behind a bend. I didn't think. I just ran. Hours earlier, that morning had been nothing. Just chores. I woke up with the usual stiffness in my knees, made some coffee, and opened the back door to let Jack out. He bounded into the yard like he always did, tail high, ears alert. By 10, we were in the truck. I needed firewood. The road into the forest was finally dry enough to use. Jack leaned out the window most of the ride, his tongue lolling, eyes locked on passing trees like he knew every one of them personally. We parked near my favorite old spot, just beyond an abandoned ranger station. There was something quiet about that part of the forest. It felt forgotten in a good way. Jack took off as soon as I opened the door. I let him. He always stayed within range. While I was chopping a few dead logs, I heard him bark once. Short, sharp. I didn't think much of it. Then I heard a second bark, then a growl. By the time I followed the sound, Jack was standing rigid at the riverbank. His nose twitched. His body was tense, ears high. I stepped beside him and followed his gaze. That's when I saw it. The cub had already fallen in. I don't know how. Maybe the bank gave out. Maybe it was playing and misjudged. But it was in the center of the river, being flung around like a rag. Jack growled once more. I touched his collar, barely. But then he launched. The splash snapped me into panic. The sound of that water swallowing him whole made my heart cave in. Now I was running along the edge, lungs burning, boots full of mud, calling his name again and again. I saw nothing but churning white and brown. Then, for a second, I saw them both. Jack had the cub. He was kicking toward the shallows. But he wasn't making progress. The weight, the current. He slipped under. I didn't think. I dove. The cold hit me like a wall. I didn't even feel the bottom. I just sank. Water punched into my ears, my nose, my mouth. The current spun me sideways, and when I broke the surface, all I could see was sky and foam and tree limbs flashing past. Then I saw fur. Jack. He was floating awkwardly near a twisted branch jutting from the bank. The cub was tangled against his body, not moving either. For a second, I thought they were both dead. I swam, harder than I ever had in my life. Every stroke was pain. My boots dragged me down. My arms burned. But I reached them. I grabbed the cub first, lifting it by the scruff like I'd seen Jack do. It was light, too light. Then I wrapped my other arm around Jack's chest and kicked toward shore. The branch caught my side and scraped deep. I didn't care. I held onto it and pulled, inch by inch, until we rolled onto muddy ground. My lungs screamed. My arms trembled. I dropped to my knees beside Jack. He wasn't breathing. I shouted his name again and again. Nothing. His mouth was open slightly, and water leaked from his nose. My hands shook as I pressed his ribs, counting compressions aloud like I remembered from that Red Cross course I took 10 years ago. 1, 2, 3. I blew into his nose. Again. Compress. Breathe. Come on, Jack. Please. Please. Suddenly, he jerked. A cough burst from his chest, and he rolled onto his side, hacking up water. I could have cried right there. He looked at me, dazed, and then he whimpered. I ran my hands along his sides, checking for broken bones. Nothing obvious, just soaked fur and exhaustion. The cub still hadn't moved. I turned to it. It was limp, eyes closed, mouth open. I laid it flat and pressed 2 fingers gently on its tiny chest. Compress. Breathe. Compress. After what felt like an eternity, it let out a wheezing squeak. It blinked, and then, with a cough, it rolled its head to the side and vomited water. I exhaled, long and shaky, and sat back in the mud. All 3 of us just lay there for a while. The roar of the river beside us, the sky gray and cold above. Eventually, I picked up Jack and carried him to the truck. He was too weak to walk. The cub, small enough to cradle in one arm, came too. I wrapped it in the flannel I kept behind the seat. The drive back was a blur. My hands shook on the wheel. Jack lay across the seat, head on my thigh, breathing shallow. The cub didn't make a sound. Back home, I lit the fireplace immediately, set Jack on a thick towel, and rubbed him down. He barely moved. His eyes stayed on me, though, like he was trying to apologize. "You did good, buddy," I whispered. "You did better than good." The cub I put in a cardboard box with blankets. It curled into a ball and trembled. Hours passed. Jack started snoring. That sound, even weak, made my chest ease. The cub drank a little goat milk from a syringe. I didn't know if it was enough. I sat on the couch with a towel over my shoulders, staring at the fire, shivering from the inside out. My mind started to wander, and suddenly I was back 2 years ago. After my wife left, everything went dark. I stopped seeing people. I stopped caring. One night, I almost drove off a cliff. The only reason I didn't was because of the damn barking coming from the back of my truck. Jack. I found him abandoned on the side of Route 87, skin and bones, covered in ticks. Took him in because I couldn't take myself anywhere else. He saved me first. Now he'd done it again. By nightfall, Jack was asleep near the fire. The cub was breathing steady, still curled tight. I stood at the window. The forest beyond the yard was black. I knew bears. Somewhere out there was a mother. And if she caught my scent on her cub, if she saw her baby in my house. I locked the door, but I didn't sleep. Sometime past midnight, I heard something outside. A low crunch of branches. Then silence. By morning, I made up my mind. I wasn't calling anyone. I'd kept the cub alive. Jack had risked everything. Turning the little guy over to some state agency now felt like betrayal. I didn't know what I was going to do long term, but for now, he was staying right here. The sun crept up slow behind the trees, casting long shadows over the frost-damp yard. I moved the cub out to the old storage shed behind the barn. It had windows, a locking door, and plenty of straw left from the winter. I rigged a small heater inside and left a bowl of milk. Jack padded behind me the whole time, limping slightly. Every time the cub whined, Jack perked up and hovered near the box. "You two bonded in that river," I muttered. By mid-morning, the cub tried to stand. His legs trembled, but he stayed up for a few seconds. He kept his eyes on Jack. Jack sat near the doorway, head tilted. It felt unreal, like I was living someone else's story. I skipped town that day. Didn't go for feed. Didn't check my mail. I stayed home. Stayed close. Every couple hours, I checked the shed. The cub started nibbling soft apples, then dry oats soaked in milk. Tiny, slow bites. Progress. Late afternoon, I heard tires on gravel. I stepped out with a shovel in hand. Pete Simmons, my neighbor, more or less. His property line ran along my backwoods. The man hadn't smiled since the Bush administration. "You okay?" he asked, stepping out of his truck. I nodded slowly. "Heard a hell of a ruckus last night," he said. "Sounded like something big out by your place." I shrugged. "You didn't happen to bring something home, did you?" I didn't answer. His eyes narrowed. "You keeping that bear cub?" My grip on the shovel tightened. He stepped closer. "You can't do that, Mike. It's illegal. You know that. You're not trained. You're not licensed." "And what do you think happens to him if I make the call?" I asked. "Not your job to ask. It's a wild animal." I didn't respond. He got back in his truck and drove off without saying another word. That night, I left the porch light on. I didn't trust Pete. The next few days blurred. The cub got stronger. Jack guarded the shed like it was his job. He slept just outside the door, growled at birds, and barked whenever I stepped away too long. On the third evening, I sat in the shed beside the cub. He'd finally let me touch him without flinching. I scratched behind his ear. Jack came in, sat next to me. The cub wobbled over, nose twitching. He sniffed Jack's paw, then his snout. And then, Slowly, carefully, he reached up and pressed his nose gently against Jack's. Jack licked his face once. I swallowed hard. I don't know what this means, I said quietly. But it's something. I slept that night for the first time since the rescue. A real sleep. Until glass shattered. I jumped up, heart pounding. One of the living room windows. A rock on the floor. Glass everywhere. I rushed to the front door. No one. Just the wind in the trees. Then I saw the paper. Folded under the rock. All it said was, "Next time, we won't miss." No name. No signature. Just fear. Jack stood behind me, teeth bared, hackles raised. I bent down, picked up the rock, and held it in my fist. The porch light flickered above me. I didn't feel safe anymore. And worse, I didn't feel alone. By the end of the week, I knew I had to do something. The rock through my window wasn't just a warning. It was a line. Someone out here believed I had no right to keep the cub alive. And maybe, just maybe, they were willing to do more than throw threats. I loaded Jack into the truck just after sunrise. The cub, now strong enough to climb into the bed by himself, curled into the corner beside a blanket. I threw a tarp loosely over him, just in case. We took the logging road north. It hadn't been maintained in years, but I knew it led to an old ranger shelter deep in the forest. My plan was simple: leave the cub there with food and hope the mother found him. Jack sat up the whole drive, ears alert, eyes flicking between me and the side mirrors. He felt it too. Something was off. 2 hours into the drive, just before the turnoff, a black pickup came out of nowhere. I barely had time to swerve. Tires screamed. We skidded sideways. Dust everywhere. I stopped just short of the ditch. The other truck blocked the road. A man stepped out. Tall, broad, wore a camo vest and a face like cold stone. Tom Weaver. His son, Dale, had been a local loudmouth for years, bragging about bear hunting and posting photos with trophies no one wanted to see. Tom walked toward my window, slow and heavy. "You got something in that truck, Mike?" I kept my hands on the wheel. "Just heading out to check traps," I said flatly. He smiled, thin and mean. "Funny. Heard from Pete you've been sheltering a cub." "That true?" Jack growled low from the passenger seat. "You should turn around," I said. "You gonna make me?" The way he leaned in, I knew he wanted me to swing first, to give him a reason. But I didn't bite. Instead, I threw the truck in reverse, spun into the trees, and took a side path only locals knew. The tires caught rock and root, bouncing us hard, but I didn't stop until the shelter came into view. The old ranger hut stood crooked but solid, deep in the thickets. No one came out here anymore. No cell signal. No roads. Just quiet. I unloaded the cub. Jack sniffed every corner, ears high, body tight. I set out fruit, fish, even an old sweatshirt that smelled like me. Just in case. We spent the night there. I couldn't sleep. Not just from the cold, or the ache in my ribs from the swerve, but from the silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was thick, like the air was holding its breath. I dozed off sometime after 3. When I woke, the door was open. The cub was gone. Jack was pacing, nose to the floor, whining. He looked at me once, sharp and accusing. Panic hit me full force. I threw on boots, grabbed my flashlight, and started into the woods. Jack tried to follow, but I told him to stay. "If something happens to me," I whispered, "you're our only way back." I tracked broken branches, mud prints, and tufts of fur. After 20 minutes, I heard a faint sound. A whimper. I moved faster. Light bounced off trees. Then I found it. The cub. In a steel snare, one paw twisted horribly. Blood soaked the dirt. I dropped beside him. I'm here, little guy." He cried out, weak and scared. I reached for the trap. Then, behind me, a gunshot. The ground kicked near my leg. I dove sideways, grabbed the cub, shielded him with my body. Another shot. The flashlight went flying. Darkness. Then silence. I didn't dare breathe. I woke up face down in pine needles. My shoulder felt like it had been torn apart. My head rang like a bell. Every breath burned. For a second, I didn't remember where I was. Then the pain snapped it all back. The trap. The cub. The gunshots. I rolled over and almost blacked out again. My flashlight was gone. My coat was soaked in blood. I pressed my hand to my shoulder, and it came away slick and warm. Then I heard it. A bark. Jack. Through the haze, I saw him bounding toward me, nose low, tail stiff. He reached me in seconds, sniffed my face, whined, and nudged under my arm. "Good boy," I muttered. You found me. He barked once, then darted off into the trees. I tried to stand, failed, and crawled. 10 feet. 20. Every branch was a knife. But then I saw him. The cub. Still trapped, still crying. Jack circled him, barking sharply. I forced myself to kneel. My fingers were clumsy, numb. It took forever, but I got the trap open. The cub fell into my arms. His paw was a mess of blood and torn fur. But he was alive. Jack stayed close as I tied my flannel shirt around the cub's leg. It wasn't much, but it stopped the worst of the bleeding. I couldn't carry him, not with my shoulder. So I half-dragged, half-walked. Jack pushed from behind, inch by inch. I don't remember most of that walk. Just pain. And Jack. Always Jack. Sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, never leaving. We reached the shelter at dawn. I collapsed inside, the cub beside me. For 2 days, I barely moved. I made a sling for my arm, cleaned the cub's wound as best I could, boiled water over a fire, fed Jack jerky and rainwater. We didn't speak, just breathed. By the 3rd day, the cub stood on his own. By the 4th, he limped to the doorway and sat in the sunlight. I watched him from the cot, my shoulder wrapped tight, my ribs bandaged with duct tape and a towel. Jack rested his head on my knee. He wants to go, I said quietly. Jack didn't move. That afternoon, I stood in the clearing with the cub. He looked back at me, wide-eyed, uncertain. I kneeled. You belong out there, I whispered. Not with us. Not forever. He made a soft, growling hum, then looked at Jack. Jack stepped forward, nudged him gently. Then again. A 3rd time. Finally, the cub turned. He walked into the woods. Slow. Hesitant. Then gone. I sat in the dirt for a long time. Jack pressed against my side. We stayed one more night in the shelter. Just to be sure. I didn't sleep. By morning, I packed the truck. The drive home was silent. Back at the house, I limped to the porch. Jack walked ahead. Then he stopped. There, in the yard, were fresh tracks. Not cub tracks. Big ones. Deep in the mud. Beside them, broken branches, flattened grass, and a soft clump of fur stuck to the fence post. I didn't say a word. Jack didn't bark. We just stood there. And somewhere in my chest, I felt a quiet peace. Like maybe she knew. Maybe she forgave us. Maybe she had been watching all along. A month passed. The forest turned greener, thicker. Rain came and went. My shoulder healed enough for me to chop kindling again. Jack limped less with each day. We settled back into our rhythm. But something had shifted. It wasn't just the quiet in the trees or the way the sun came through the windows. It was in me. In Jack. The cub didn't return. Not once. I walked the property every morning just in case. Checked the trail cameras. Nothing. No signs, no movement. But the feeling never left. Like we were still being watched. Then, one Sunday, it happened. I stepped onto the porch and saw something at the edge of the yard. Down near the fence line. Beside the same old post where I found the tuft of fur weeks ago. A fish. Fresh. Glistening. Laid neatly across a flat rock. No claw marks. No chew. Just placed. I stood there a long time, staring. Jack sat beside me, tail still. I didn't touch it. Didn't need to. The next Sunday, another fish. Then another. It became routine. Always the same place. Always silent. Never seen. Sometimes it was trout. Sometimes salmon. Once, it was a string of 3, tied together with bark. Jack stopped barking at night. I stopped locking the door. We never spoke about it, not out loud. But I knew what I believed. Not just hoped, believed. She knew. Somehow, she knew we didn't hurt her baby. That we gave him a chance. The wound on my shoulder faded into a scar. I kept the trap that hurt him, rusting now, hanging above the woodpile. A reminder. The window that got smashed. I never fixed it. Just covered it with plastic and let the draft remind me every night that people break things they don't understand. But not everything stays broken. A week ago, I found Jack sitting out by the fence at dawn, staring into the trees. His ears weren't up. He wasn't guarding. Just waiting. I didn't ask what he saw. We just sat together. 2 old souls on a quiet patch of dirt where something impossible had happened. Not a miracle. Something harder. Trust. And even now, as I write this, I know the story isn't over. Maybe he'll come back one day, bigger, stronger. Maybe he won't. Doesn't matter. Some things leave you. Others leave something with you. And those things stay forever.